Hello, this is Lisa Lee and welcome to my channel. So today we're doing a very kind of I'm playing with an idea with this reading along the lines of the topic is like, why do I have to suffer my enemies? And that's an interesting question to sort of bring to a reading. But you know, I was in meditation this morning, and I'll tell you what happened. You know, I always go before the altar of the goddess. You know, I bow before the goddess. I sit with the goddess. I meditate with the goddess and the energy of the divine feminine. And most of the time, this is like a really transcendent, beautiful experience. But this morning, the experience was more like angry. You know, I found myself so angry because I've been looking at the world and I've been looking at the atrocities, and I have been saying, that's God. Unfortunately, what we're looking at here is like, when I think about the definition of God, when I think about the definition of the all-powerful, I think of that which I have no power over that has power over me, and all the gradations of that, and like false gods that have power that they shouldn't. And this morning, I addressed the goddess and I said, if the power on this earth that makes itself known as all-powerful is violence, then we got the siren. if the power that makes itself known is violence, if the God that makes itself known and omnipotent is cruelty, then that's what we're dealing with. Let's call a spade a spade. And so, you know, I'm entering into this reading with this question of like, why do I have to suffer my enemy? Why is the power in this world concentrated with the most disgusting, horrific greed? Like, why do we have to endure this as a people? Where is the mother, the goddess, if this is what we're dealing with? And so there's the healer, and we've got the forest, and we've got the riddle, and on the bottom of the deck we have the vow. It's an interesting set of cards to begin to come out with. Let me keep pulling. Let's see what else. Not this deck. This deck. So I'm looking at that healer card, and so we're going to be asking tough questions because why not? You know, like if there's any truth to my ability to channel divine energies, then there's no sense in not using that to ask the really, really hard question. And the healer card being about a state of unhealed that requires like the application of something to come around and heal it. And I'm seeing this triple-headed snake as being in opposition to that healing, or maybe even a part of it. Let me just get some more cards because that's really interesting. That's a very weird thing that just came through that I don't quite have a grip on. So let me get some more. Lover's card, High Priestess, and the Seven of Wands. This is about defense. So I think we're going to start with the riddle, because the riddle really is the riddle really speaks to this question. Wheel of Fortune, we've got some change coming, thankfully. And this is external change too. This is not, I always, especially this one, the Wheel of Fortune really for me right here feels like there is external change, like very much on the horizon. There's a lot of fear, like being, wow, that's really, I just felt like such a potent like feeling that the fear being generated right now, it's like a frenzy energetically. And it's like legitimate too. So I want to talk about the circumstances a little bit, and the riddle. The question that we start with this riddle is like, you know, if there is only the presence of a power structure that is pure evil, then what hope is there for anyone beyond like complete nihilism? You know, what are we going to do with this urge and this depth of our souls? We want to pray, we want to worship, we want to connect with the divine. What does the fact that the power structure is pure evil makes life and living like an on this earth hell on earth? What about that? You know, like, what does that mean for the whole process of believing that there is something that cares and something that loves? So with the riddle here, you know, and the Lovers and the High Priestess and the Seven of Wands, maturing spiritually, there's a huge defense against this. And where we have this change coming in, it's around this promise. And with this forest card, can't see the forest through the trees, is what I'm hearing. I'm going to get some more. Because this is... yeah, I woke up this morning just, you know, someone who works with spirit day in and day out. I just was like, Spirit, I'm sorry. I'm seeing things that are unacceptable to me. And if these things are unacceptable to me, and then they're not unacceptable to you, then I don't know. I just don't know. And so I really do need this answer, probably as much as anybody else's. I need this answer to be clear. And the beauty of divination is there is a conversational element to this. Two of Swords, the Three of Pentacles, and the Seven of Cups, and the High Priestess again. Okay. So the goddess is sort of urging me to kind of like move in with this idea of let's just establish some baselines that we can all agree on. Eight of Pentacles and the Magician. Let's establish a couple of baseline things. One, there's a seen and there's an unseen realm, and every spiritual belief system in the world knows that, and even people who don't believe in anything have some experience of paranormal weirdness, because that's just the way it is. So we know that there's a seen and there's an unseen realm, and we know that as above, so below. You know, if we understand that our bodies are an ecosystem and we're in an ecosystem. And so whatever is the unseen world and its power, the external forces that influence, they're not all good. That said, there are just as many that are good. So we do seem to have some kind of a dualistic friction here. There's protection in place, but that's not obvious, right? So like, you know, this Two of Swords here, I'm seeing this as actually being a kind of protection. There are energies here that are like, I'm gonna, and to the question of this reading, like, why do I have to suffer my enemy? Why do I have to deal with an enemy? Why does this have to be a part of, like, I want to just evolve, I want to grow, I want to thrive? Why does an enemy have to be something that's contending at all? And so the goddess is showing me, like, this is, you know, the reality of the situation in terms of, like, not being able to see through the veil all the way. It's a kind of protection. And the reflection here, you know, that there's an aspect of us that is in the flesh and there's an aspect of us that is in the spirit. And that, again, she's showing me that the two worlds, the seen and the unseen world, they kind of mirror each other. And it makes sense that there would be a kind of mirroring there. But to the extent that these energies that are just shadows have no power to harm this person, so long as there's no awareness of them. She's saying, like, that's your clue related to consciousness and perception. Consciousness and perception. She's like, the clue here is that if you don't perceive it, it has no access to your attention. And if it has no access to your attention, it has no access to you. But that necessitates a kind of blindness and a cut off. It necessitates a kind of distance. And that distance, and I'll find out why, you know, I'll find out what that means, because that's, like, so far, that's just really interesting. Yeah, this is, like, why would that be, though? Let me just keep looking at this for 1 second. I'm so curious. Okay, so she's showing me a scene from, it's a scene from the show, the OA, and if you haven't seen it, like, stop everything, go watch it, it's so good. But if you have seen it, like, there's this part when she goes back up into the Celestials, and before she comes back down again, the angel takes her eyes so that she doesn't have to witness with her eyes the horrors that are around her. And so the goddess is saying, like, listen, you know, this is not a doctrine of, like, you know, everything's going to be, yeah, she's like, this is not a doctrine of true love's power. Yeah, I feel that presence of the mother really saying like, all right, sit down. That presence of the mother saying like, now let's sit down. You're asking me to answer the question, and the answer to the question about the power structure that exists, the evil that exists in that power structure, that's obvious. It's obvious. It's obvious that the mother isn't able. That's scary, right? That doesn't feel right. We need an all-powerful parental figure to make us feel safe spiritually in this world. And what if the parental figure that exists isn't all-powerful? Like, we have that moment in childhood and it's horrifying. But what if the spiritual truth that we don't want to look at, that we don't want to accept, that we want to bypass with this notion that true love's power overcomes everything and we don't have to worry? She's saying that she's pointing to the injustice of those that have been forgotten by God, because their existence and their experience confronts this notion that true love's power covers it all, and that we're all going to be okay, because that won't happen to you. But you know that if it's happening somewhere, it's happening to you. And just as it happens somewhere else, it happens to you, that there's no possibility that there could be a higher power that cares when that exists in the world. And so here's where, you know, we have the Seven of Cups. This is where it gets, this riddle gets really gnarly, because with the Seven of Cups here about like confusion, what's real and what's an illusion, what's a delusion, like, you know, feeling your way through and not feeling like there's anything tangible to really ground in. The maturing, the spiritual maturing that the mother wants for her daughters and her sons, like very particularly, is one where there is a defense heavily against it and where healing is required. And if we're going to look at this honestly, we have to note that despite everything we want to believe about love's power to conquer all, if it's something that is a delayed, love's power will conquer all later, in another life, in another time, in another incarnation, in another version, in the split earth, in the ascension, with the aliens. But it's not here and it's not now. She's like, as long as these forces that are in control can keep you running or aiming at something that's just beyond you, they can trick you out of your power every single time. And this is where the message gets a little funny, because with the Three of Pentacles being building this cathedral, you know, an enormous undertaking. So the Divine Mother, this energy is saying like, this power structure that you are under the tyranny of, that is extracting your life, you know, and your life force into a vacuum of greed. This took a very long time to build. And she's saying, and you are right to think that there are external influences that are upholding this entire system of oppression. And you are right to think that it was a very planned and concise takedown that created a world order and a world view that's cannibalistic. That comes from somewhere. There's power. There is an external force that's influencing your life in a way that doesn't leave you free to thrive, that pushes you into a position where you have to consider that there's nothing more important than survival. Let's keep going. I really want to know everything. So the Divine Mother is saying, like, yes, there is an opposing force. Nature is perfect, but there's an external opposing force. So let's like learn a little bit about what that means. Because on the one hand, there's protection in the veil. But as we approach what it means to see through that veil, as we get closer to this notion of a revolution of spirit, of she's saying that the blinders are beginning, like there's a lot of spiritual stuff going on where the veil is thinning, and like she's saying, my children are being sort of like beckoned forward into a new understanding. But it does really feel like, look at these, like if you look at this card, that the veil held a kind of protection related to like, well, what's happening. And so the mother's saying, like, I want to sort of stop you right now and say, like, this is not about giving fear, pushing fear, because the problem that we're facing right now is a saturation of fear. And so we're not trying to add to that. But what makes you afraid so much, this mother's saying, like, you know, when you go to the goddess, when you go to the mother and you say, like, I need to understand this, what you're going to get is as an honesty that lands as true because you already know it. So we already know that, like, the power structure is not the goddess, is not the creator, and you know that because that part of you that is divine is in revolt of some of these atrocities that you're seeing all over the place, in every direction, multiple genocides, and even this notion of seeing the face of that, multiple wars. So she's saying that in the same way we can look in the world and we can point out that action is evil, the person who does that is evil, this other person that's capable of that is evil. The evil exists where I can see it in the world. The mother says, like, of course, and we know this from, like, you know, watching all the supernatural experiences that we've had, whether we've seen them or we've experienced them ourselves. We've all sort of encountered, like, what would feel like an evil energy. So if evil exists in the seen, and we've already sort of encountered what feels like could be evil in the unseen, then we already know that the power structure that is upholding that which we see exists in the unseen. And so yes, there is a real problem with evil. And she's saying, I don't want to make you afraid. I want to empower you because you weren't born helpless. With this high priestess here on the bottom of the deck and this wheel of fortune, like moving into this new, the veil is thinning. We're going to start to see things like kind of as they are. And there is this sense of chaos and panic. But she's like, but this is what it looks like when the power structure that has held you captive and enslaved and hurt, this is beginning to crumble. Let's get more. I want to get a lot more, actually. Because this is, you know, the hard part is this notion of trust and, like, well, you know, the mystery here. Oh, man, you know, so badly I want to, like, hail down a UFO. So badly I want to get on the horn with, like, whatever Andromeda. I want to just get someone on the phone and say, like, no more puzzles, no more riddles, no more mysteries. Somebody has the power to overcome this. Somewhere in the universe exists a strength that is empowered to do something about this. And the lack of doing something about this tells us that there's not that love, that there's abandonment. And so when I say that to the mother, that the mystery equals a kind of abandonment, she's like, let's begin to look at that. And I think that, yeah, she's saying just slow down. It's okay to just be there. This says, the unknown, the unknowable, ESP, psychic abilities, the cosmos, universal truth, oneness, source, the unnameable, shadow work, inner knowing, tingling, ghosts, other worlds, space, enigmas, the occult, intuition. It's established. It's established that that which we do not understand and that we cannot see, that asserts itself as all-powerful and that exerts itself as having lots of influence over those in power. We know that this is destructive. We know that this is bad, and we know this is no good. And this, again, we're not coming back to some biblical nonsense about the devil. No, we're talking about, like, the devil and the concept of evil. The costumes that it wears are there to mask what it really is. And what it really is something. But with the Lovers and Venus here, and the High Priestess and Perception here, and the Defense being about relationship and relating to each other. So your spiritual maturation, you being able to grow up into your like spiritual authority and be able to sort of wield that power and leave, you know, the Lover's card against like about leaving home, you know, with another to start your family, or a change that's motivated by desire. Like maturing with desire as it's like impetus. I want to understand why that is right here. Because with the riddle we have, yeah, something really gnarly is in charge, obviously. You can see it. Even if you don't believe in unseen things, like something gnarly is in charge is a sentence. We can put the period on the end of it. It's truth. Boom. You know what I mean? We can look at that. So when she comes back around and says, your ability to mature, you know, and your ability to stand on your own and have stability, that is motivated by love and wanting to connect and wanting to create new life and new worlds. Like, I don't know what she, like, that's a very strange jump. So let me get some more cards on that. She's saying Venus, beauty, harmony, romance, charm, receiving, sensuality, luxury, wealth, diplomacy, magnetism, value, pleasure. What you want. There will be responsibility, but also success. So the 10th house. This is where she says the compass and the map, it has a lot to do with what you want and what you desire. That this is one of these experiences where, like, she's showing me Frodo from the Lord of the Rings, and she's showing me, okay, let's say Sauron. Say we know that there's some dark nasty in charge, and that there's dark nasty that has the power right now, and that there's something wrong because it's obvious that whatever is operating in the archetype of God is an angry, cruel, ruthless something. But that the map to overcome this and to conquer this starts with it's in holding desire and love and actually holding this in spite of, and displaying this, letting status look different, creating a different power structure. Oh gosh, it doesn't seem like it's good enough, does it? You know, like that doesn't really seem like it's good enough. Cooperation, decisions about resulting from the fairness shown. Man, I have such a hard time with this. Spiritual values, long-range travel, what is to be shared. It's really obvious in a lot of ways that, you know, where the divine feminine aspect of God has its power is in community. The divine feminine aspect of God is community. And it exists in strength and power when community is strong and powerful. And so she's saying, you know, when you look at, because she hears her children and she says, I hear everyone saying, save me, help me, save me, help me, save me. But the mother's saying, my hands to reach, my ability to carry is in your being coherent. Like she's showing me coherence, in your coherence of your strengths and your qualities. And that's why the roadmap starts with what you love. And so it's not really here. It's not satisfying. And she's saying, you know, with the High Priestess, you have this power in your perception, in your speech, in your thoughts, and, you know, in what you value in terms of media, and what you value in terms of love, and the way that you talk about things, and the way that you socialize. You have in this third house, there's a revolution that can take place here, and that is taking place here. And she's saying you're feeling it happen, and the panic is around the change that is everywhere. And the last-ditch effort at violence and cruelty and warlord is making itself known, and there's no mask that can hide its ugliness. And so when we think about all of this defense against what it means to come together so that the divine feminine, that community, that power and community can overcome this very false God, it's an unsatisfying answer. Because we're brought up with an idea of something save me. And there's nothing more terrifying than thinking that there isn't a something save me going to happen. The hardest thing for me when I see the violence and the cruelty is knowing that that is me. that for that to happen anywhere makes it a possibility that it can happen for me. And if it's a possibility that it can happen for me, if it's real as an evil that can visit my life, then it has power over my life. And that's how this destructive power makes itself known and makes itself shown, through the violence that it can impose on you in the way of, you need something to survive that. You need something to be saved from for that. You don't have enough power. You are helpless to that. That is the actual face of evil, is what the Divine Mother is saying. It manifests in a lot of different ways, and it has its symptoms. She's saying that what we identify with as evil is all the symptoms of what evil actually is. And as long as we're working on attacking the symptoms, then there's no chance of seeing what it is. So with celebrate the sacred gap and the thin veil. Celebrate the sacred gap. She's saying, where you are right now is like the breaking point, but before the breakthrough. It's when the face of evil makes itself known. And then the horror of everything that we had sort of keeping us, she's saying, cordoned off or in some kind of ignorance around like the thin veil. With a tune to the call and tune in and turn on. She's saying all of your ancestors, all of your guides, all of the celestial, she's like terrestrial energies that want to see like humanity thrive and want to see a return of power to the goddess mother. She's saying that all of the spirits of the earth want a return of power to the goddess mother, because the goddess mother operates and manifests in life in community. And that's in a community of humans and humanity, and within community within the animal kingdom. It's with our community with nature. Like, it's in communion and community, and none of that is in balance right now. And what it means for the divine feminine aspect of God to rise up and to begin to sort of take her place is for all of us to connect very, very, she's saying very succinctly, the powers in the connection. And that there's so much power in that connection that which holds the power right now is its entire orientation, its entire job is to scare you into thinking that what is truly God is its violence. What is truly God is its oppression. What's truly God is its slavery, instead of what's truly God, which is the numbers. She's saying the problem with hierarchy and the weakness with hierarchy is at the top that controls everything as this tyrannical, wicked, cruel, Siron God is, she's showing me a pyramid, 10 people. And at the bottom, where it hurts the most, millions. And so if we shift our focus away from the helplessness of that 10 people with their violence, and what those 10 people with their violence is doing to everyone, and on how we have to survive all of this, if we shift our eyes from looking at the tippy top of those 10 people and the violence and the cruelty and the helplessness, and we shift our eyes to the numbers, and we know that the divine feminine aspect of God is in community, and that in connecting with each other, we connect with her, and then that is the power to overthrow. That is, I'm seeing moving in the mountain from within. That is what it means to move the mountain from within, because we can't see our way, can't see the forest through the trees. can't see the power that we hold in communication and community, in communion with each other. We're getting an inkling. We're starting to break some of the strongholds around being able to connect beyond narratives and structures that are in place to separate us. So we're starting to move this in the right direction. And she's saying, in the frenzy that we're seeing and the destruction that we're seeing has a lot to do with the success of that. Because the opposition has to rise up in a fearsome show of power and violence in order to keep the populace subdued. That's just the truth. And so when the populace becomes somewhat powerful, that's when you see this rise of a show of power and violence. It keeps us all sort of feeling like this liminal space between trying to fight back and trying to survive. Because the all-powerful, the God that makes itself known in the world is violence. And so she's saying what it means to have that goddess make herself known in the world is connection. It's the opposite of violence. And that if we add violence to violence, we make more violence. But if we begin to really think about our strategy as fostering connection, she's saying there's more power in the moment-to-moment experience of succeeding than we realize. And I have to kind of like stop and pause here, because this sounds, again, you know, a lot of times when I'm channeling, you know, the divine will bring through these beautiful flowery things and I'll be really grateful, but then I still end up being like, who the hell in the universe has all the power? Because if the goddess is dependent on her children connecting to each other, then the balance of power is going to be off as long as there are those that align with fear. And the answer isn't giving up or losing while that which exerts itself as powerful with violence, like takes the toll of thousands and hundreds, and, you know, this is ridiculous. So with this thin veil, you know, this can be like the thinning of the veil that we're all seeing, and it's only going to get worse because and she's saying, like, right now you have to understand that where the power structure is disrupted, it makes a show of force related to how much it can inflict fear. And the answer isn't spiritual bypass. I don't want to look at fear and I'm just going to sing holy praises into la 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 la. Like, that's never the answer. But what it means for us to actually like let this veil thin to the point where we're able to see clearly that at the very least, it's violence and evil that holds the power right now. And whatever is behind those essences, we do have power over in numbers. That's what we have. That is where our strength is. And that is where their weakness is. With the celebrate the sacred gap, give thanks for the buffer time. Like, I do believe that what a lot of us are feeling right now is this held in place kind of panic. And as the veil gets thinner and thinner, and it intensifies, because in addition to the violence that we're seeing asserting itself as the God, the all-powerful in the world, you know, very demonstrably, that the veil gets thinner, it means that these same powers that hold the spiritual, you know, the stronghold, and I'm going to say the sentence again, the God that makes itself known as all-powerful is violence and evil. And what that looks like in a world that no longer adheres to the empire spiritually is that it's going to start to look a little bit scarier too, that the forces of violence and the forces that promote fear very demonstrably as external forces are going to keep showing their faces to try and make you run back into line, you know, to feel that learned helplessness in every single avenue of your life until you submit. And the opposite is connection. And the goddess is saying, and the opposite isn't what we understand as having to hold the weight of the starving universe on our backs as individuals. connection is these moments, me coming on here this morning and saying, my prayer this morning was, my goddess, you've forsaken the entire world. I can see that the power that has all the control right now is that of unbelievable cruelty and violence. And so where are you? When we are beginning to authentically connect and communicate and talk about what it means to value each other and value our own lives, I mean, that's the first brick in the wall. And that's where she's saying, like, this notion of the high priestess and perception. This is really important. This is something that yeah, I gotta feel this for a second. So when we think about empire and we think about that the empire has a belief system that there's no way of skirting the issue here. The lack of high priestesses that are like able to connect with the divine through like divination, that are able to connect with the lack of shamans, all of the indigenous and divine feminine aspects of gods and goddesses that have been wiped off the face of this earth in favor of the colonialism and the power structure that exists as the force of evil on earth that is all powerful, that it asserts itself as God. That the answer is in not only connecting with each other, but connecting to the divine in a subversive way that says, I am empowered by the divine feminine aspect of God that says, all I have to do is reach my hand in one direction or another direction and try to hold something or someone. Some of us feel very disconnected. Some of us can't see our way through that disconnection because it's so thick. Can't see the forest through the trees. Survival and the demand for survival and the demands of survival and the demands of an all-powerful force of God on earth as violence and greed has us with not enough time or enough bandwidth. But the actual answer to the problem, it starts with these representations of the divine feminine aspect of God on earth and stepping into that position of, I'm going to be the representation of the divine feminine aspect of God on earth. I'm going to represent the goddess. That's a subversive spiritual position to hold, because you're saying, I'm making community the thing that I worship. And when I worship community, and when others around me worship community, we empower community. And when we empower community, we topple the god of violence that asserts its power over everyone right now. Because again, the goddess is showing me it's the strengths and qualities that we have as community is numbers. The strength and abilities that the warlord god has is fear. And so stepping into this high priestess, stepping into this I worship community is very different than I worship the power of the All-Father who thus saith and there is. That's a very different orientation. And so with the Seven of Wands being about defense, the mother is saying, I want you to lodge the biggest defense that has ever been asserted against a power structure in the history of power structures. And she's saying, I want you to connect with others. I want you to see the divinity in others. That is the subversive. And I want you to not stop seeing the divinity of others. She said, and I want you to not stop looking at the violence that is inflicted on your neighbors as the violence that is inflicted on yours. Because when you worship community, you worship the divine feminine aspect of God. And when you worship the divine feminine aspect of God as community, the numbers and the power is there. And the subversive act of defense that is required right now is connecting and connecting and connecting and connecting, because there's nothing but structures in place to come against that. There's nothing but structures in that place to tear that down. And so, we are in this moment where change is beginning to really kind of It's not that change is beginning to show its face. The power that was once held over us as all powerful is beginning to make a show of itself, but also in that show of itself, the community that is sort of beginning to sort of step into place and at least from a heart space say, like, this is unacceptable. That pain is my pain. The goddess is saying that's what's needed. You know, making that home, you know, with this Taurus card here, this earthly, practical, steadfast, productive, fertile, tactile, ample, worthy, patient, deliberate, high priestess. She's like, there has never been a greater call. The Wheel of Fortune being about this change in spiritual values. When we take our worship away from status, when we take our worship away from hierarchy, when we take our worship away from the empire and put that worship on community, that changes absolutely everything. To make the center of your worship community with humanity, community with the greater earth and all of its species. She's like, that's goddess worship right there. And so when I started this reading, it was because I sat down at my altar this morning and I said, you know, God is dead. God is the all-powerful thing that we keep looking up and we're starving and we're hungry and we're sad and we're hopeless and we're being murdered and we're being subjugated and we're being enslaved and no one cares enough and no one's saying enough and there's compassion fatigue. And the goddess said, I know. She said, I know. She didn't say I could make it all better. She said, I can't make it all better without you. And I didn't like that. Because the promise that I was given when I was little was that God, the Daddy, was going to just fly us up in the sky and save us from all the terrible things that will happen to all the terrible people. And that's one of the harder disappointments. But, you know, part of what the goddess is bringing through here is that if we can, in a spiritual sense, get over the disappointment of a belief that says you are entitled to salvation, then we can begin to save our own lives and each other. Sometimes the most beautiful things turn out to be the trap itself. And so I want to see what she wants to tell me about this vow and the king in reverse. I don't know if the king is, that's really interesting, but let me see what she wants to say about this vow. We're doing okay on time. This is coming out kind of fast and furious. The goddess is really lamenting. She's showing me lamenting. She's showing me vibes, the Morgan, and this aspect of keening, which is like mourning, crying openly. The mother is lamenting. She says she's keening, she's with her community in the pain and in the anguish. And she says the mother is always present in your creativity. The mother is always present in your inspiration. The mother is always present in any face of God that you will accept in the way of comfort. And she says that the divine feminine aspect of God is always present with you in everything. But the divine feminine aspect of God is powerful in community and powerless in separation. And that's a reality that needs to be faced just as much as the reality that needs to be faced that says that true love's power isn't the all-powerful. The all-powerful is making its power known by demonstrating it through violence. So, you know, there's a need to take off any kind of glasses that tells us anything to the opposite, because the goddess is saying it's only going to get worse as it gets better. It's gonna look like you've been abandoned for a minute. And she's saying, and that's not the promise of God and salvation. She's saying the promise of Mother is that the creativity and the unction to connect within you is going to be what builds that bridge out of the hellscape that has been designed against the divine feminine aspect of God and against community. Three of Cups there, she said, the most subversive thing you can do is find commonality and connect. The most subversive thing you can do is find a way out of a comfort zone that says the world's too dangerous for me to go outside. And a lot of you, she's showing me bad weather in the body, that this is torture, that this is, that no one, that there's storms happening inside of you, and that outside, and there's too much, and there's a breaking point, and there's a need for help. And she's saying that giving up hope, she's saying if that doesn't give way to connection, then we're kind of not going to be okay. But she's saying that in connection, there is wish fulfillment. She's saying in connection, there is liberation. And that which asserts itself as God of this world through its violence and its ability to inflict that violence and that greed and that cruelty on so many. She said the reality and the truth is that the power is in the numbers. The power is in the numbers, and it's a perception. It's a change in a perception, and it's a change in what we value, and it's a change in what we value spiritually. If all we value spiritually is salvation for ourselves, for the few that we love, for those that are going to add to the crown jewels for us in heaven, if that's all we're valuing spiritually, is a kind of absorption into a one essence to the exclusion of all else. So she's like, if we're not worshiping community and diversity and ecosystem, then we're not worshiping the goddess, the mother. And she's saying, and that's the restoration, and that's the change that we need to be moving forward. And it is going to be a little bit difficult in the beginning because we have been so heavily isolated and so heavily reliant on ourselves, and frankly beat up enough to create an emotional intelligence to the bottom of the ocean, but without anyone to share it with, because there's not enough time in the day, because you're too tired at the end of the day. Because what you do have time to share is just like a television show and some like unfulfilling food and maybe a moment of non-panic. The Seven of Wands calls for a defense of the divine feminine aspect of God in the form of relating. Radical relating. You know, this really speaks to this oath. She says, if you show up for each other, I am showing up for you. If your wish fulfillment is in satisfying the demands of not just yourself, but community writ large, she's like, you have everything that you need in each other, with each other. But it requires a coherence about the moment that we're in, the times that we're facing, and a very dramatic shift away from an expectation and demand of the divine that you be saved whilst everyone else, you know, suffer whatever consequences might make sense to that, to the God of whom, what, where. It takes a really radical shift that says, I worship connection and community, and that the power in that kind of focus and that kind of worship, she just shows me like a net that catches everybody. And so we are feeling powerless in this moment where we want to make these changes, but it looks like evil is showing its godlike ability to be violent, unchecked. And so the Divine Mother is saying, listen, we've had all of these awakenings. You've had this opportunity to see things clearly. The masks are off. The face of evil is making itself known, and it is very few against very many. And your way out of this is with each other. Oh my gosh, you know, these channel messages, man, sometimes they come through with such a force. I want to end this. I keep on talking about taking the spiritual technology that's been stolen back And a lot of my readings and a lot of the work that I do sort of, you know, I start from this premise that says that colonialism and the religion that it built took a piece from each conquered nation and each belief system of that conquered nation as it conquered. It took this belief and it took that, it cherry picked, and it created a belief system where the religious and spiritual technology worked, but the dogma that it was attached to was corrosive and evil and controlling. And so it was like almost saying that here, this is religious technology and power, that must be God. And it's not. And so as we begin to take our religious technology back, because it was conquering and colonialism, and we begin to sort of take those well-refined spiritual practices away from a power structure that is contrary to spiritual growth, we begin to start to say, you know, prayer, that was, every culture has that, and we're just going to use that, we're going to just take it, it works, you know. And to the extent that, like, you know, there are those that are saying, well, I don't want to use any word that's identified with Christianity, they burned all the witches and they're going to burn me and they're it's really, you know, my hope, and I never even really thought about this until recently, is to start to see like witchcraft in churches. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you really want to beat the oppressor. You really want to come against, you know, that which was destroyed and ravaged and taken and displaced. Take the structures that they have put in place and move into them with community. And instead of using those structures to extort and exploit and greed, actually serve community, actually worship community. She's like, the mother can do it. She's like, the creativity and the opportunities at connection in all of the different ways that they might present themselves. If you ask the mother to be with you in this process, to guide you in this process of reconnecting to each other, reconnecting to the earth, reconnecting to the spiritual technologies that have worked for thousands of years, and being able to use them in a different way that doesn't serve something that you know doesn't work, you know? So I'm going to end with a prayer subversively, and it's a prayer to the goddess. And so let's go ahead and take that spiritual technology of prayer and offer it to the goddess as we exit this reading and enter our day. The throat chakra, discernment, the third eye chakra, and the bottom of the deck is universal love. So if you want to agree with me as I pray, we can do it, or you can listen to it and then come back and decide you agree. But the act of group prayer is really about agreement. And so coming into that place of coherent agreement spiritually has an impact. So as we go before the goddess, we come before the goddess and we ask the goddess to bring in the frequency of the throat chakra to support our self-expression and our sense of peace and balance. We ask that the goddess give us discernment to support our ability to view the world and the people around us from a place of inner balance and detachment, yet with compassion and wisdom. We ask the goddess to bring in the energy of the third chakra to support our intuition and our inner knowing, our imagination and our psychic powers. And we ask the Divine Mother to bring in the power of universal love, to activate the connection we feel to each other, to our planet, and the whole of existence in itself. So, you know, I started this reading with, why do we have to deal with our enemy? And the Mother says, clasp, take hands, take the hands of those around you. Begin to connect subversively and connect as an act of revolution against everything that you've been taught about separation, about not being good enough, about not having what it takes, about not being of value. Every single time you make a connection and you bring healing and catharsis for yourself and others with that connection, every single time you do that, you undermine a power structure that says you have to survive and you and yours and survival of the fittest. And so with this last aspect of our prayer, I'm going to ask the goddess to step in and begin to intervene within community and within our relationship to community in a way that lets us overcome that which asserts itself as God in the world, but has no power unless we agree to its power. And this is going to be a process because we can't see the forest through the trees. We can't see a way to overthrow this hierarchy. We know that violence won't work. But we're being pushed to participate in violence, to affirm its dominion. And in connection, we refuse to do so. And so we ask the Mother for the ability and the power to really step into this change. And with that, I'm going to close the prayer in the name of the Mother, in the name of the Daughter, in the name of all that is holy. So mote it be, and so it is. I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to go watch this, because, man, did I sit down with this question burning in my heart. And I hope that what came through can help us begin to think about what it means to have this spiritual shift take place so that we can physically step into it. Because what we can't do is start throwing bombs. So I'm going to leave this there, and I'm going to load this up, and I'll see you guys again soon.